On the resurrection morning, when all the dead in Christ shall rise, I'll have a new body. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the Plain People's Podcast, a library full of tales of abuse, struggle, and survival from former Amish, Mennonite, and Anabaptist church members. I'm your host, Jasper Hoffman, and along with your co-host, Mark Masoner, we are two ex-Mennonites on a mission to give our people the voice to share their stories the way you've never heard it before. Keep in mind that every story and voice you hear is in direct rebellion to our upbringing. We come from a world of secrets and shame, cover-ups and coverings, and we were raised that speaking out against the church is in essence to speak out against Christ, bringing us a future of damnation, suffering, unimaginable punishment, and also bringing shame onto our families. But there are deep, dark secrets to be told, and children's innocence is currently at stake, and we can no longer sit in the comfort of our own survival and not share our stories. And so, this podcast was born to be a light for the plain people everywhere. And we are going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Enjoy!
No more pain, there'll be no more strife. Yes, raising the likeness of my Savior, ready to live in glory glad. I'll have a new body. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life.
Hi everyone! We sat down with former Old Order Amish James Schwartz to discuss his journey out of the church and becoming a poet. We talk openly about his path of embracing his sexuality, the need for better education within the Amish people, and finding his way in the world. James is the author of The Literary Party, Growing Up Gay and Amish in America, and also works for the Amish Heritage Foundation, paving a way for former Amish members to secure a better future. The New York Times is featuring James this Sunday in their paper, and we encourage you to read more about his journey there. James's song at the end of this episode is the traditional Amish hymn of praise for all those who are wondering. Rumspringa forever. Let's jump in. It looks like you have done a lot of interviews. I was kind of reading some of your blog posts and news articles and everything, which is great. How has that been received? Like, really, have you found it that people are interested? Have you found that it's received well? What's your experience been so far?
So I've been doing this almost 10 years. Talking about my gay Amish, my life story, and it has been received well. I've got a lot of, press from, well, I should say gay press. I haven't had, The Budget or De Blot or any Amish publication say, oh my God, we must have you. Yeah. This is all pretty much on one side of the fence.
You mean you're not the centerfold for The Budget?
I know, I'm so disappointed.
I'm shocked.
I know.
Did you know that Jasper was a Budget columnist? She was a writer for The Budget.
Oh, for The Budget. Okay, I wanted to be a writer for The Budget before I realized how inane that is.
Yeah, I was. That was my first writing gig when I believe I was 15 or 16. So, I was destined for stardom early on, obviously.
Yeah. That's how it always starts. Okay, so for your readers that don't know who I am from the Old Order Amish. It would be the Swiss Amish. Dad's family is all from Adams County, from Bern, Indiana. And then he moved to just across the border to Michigan. And so I was born and raised in Michigan. It was a pretty conservative, kind of a strict household. Fairly typical for Old Order Amish, if there's such a word. It tends to vary a lot in regards to the type of Amish that are out there. But yeah, I would say that we were just sort of middle of the road, conservative, not super conservative like the
Schwartz and Truber Amish.
The Schwartz and Amish. Thank you, yes.
So for our listeners that aren't familiar with what a conservative Amish would be, like, what was your daily life like within your family home and within your church structure?
Okay, so, well, my situation was a little different because, my classmates at school, like, they would have to go home and they would have to, milk a bunch of cows, and they would have to do a lot of work in the fields and that sort of thing. But my dad had already been retired by the time I was a teenager, so there really wasn't much of a working farm. We just had a couple horses. Okay. So to me, it was like a typical day for me beyond, feeding cats and dogs and horses and things. It didn't really involve a lot of field work. It didn't involve a lot of milking cows the way my classmates had to. And then on top of that, all of my brothers and sisters were a lot older than I was, so they had already left the house. And my mother had passed away when I was 9 years old. And so it was pretty much just Dad and I growing up. So in a lot of ways, my life really wasn't a lot like, my peers, my classmates, because they had a lot more responsibilities, a lot more, physical labor they had to do. That's what life is like. For people that don't know anything about the Amish, there's a lot of physical labor. And the horse and buggy thing might seem kind of romantic to quote-unquote outsiders, but, when you have to get up at 5 a.m. and go get a horse and cross 2 snowy fields to do it, and then bring the horse in and feed him and hitch him up to the buggy. I mean, it's a lot of work just for, daily life.
How many head of horse did you have then, since your family was small? Was there a typical number of size herd that you guys would normally have versus the other families?
The other families would have a lot of horses, probably. At least some of them did. Maybe not all of them. But, we only had a couple buggy horses. When I was younger, really young, I remember we had a herd of, Clydesdale. There was probably, 15 or 20 Clydesdale horses in the barn. Because I have a lot, I have memories of playing underneath the horse's feet, which sounds like really horrible parenting, but it was fine. They were great.
Were you allowed to ride the horses?
That we didn't have any trained horses, but I would jump on one of the buggy horses. Let me ride them around the farmyard if I wanted to, but it wasn't like they were trained to have me on their back or they knew what I was really doing. They were just sort of cool with it.
So I'm going to steal this really quickly, and ask you a question that has not been asked before. So I come from the equine background and working in the industry, and so we have a lot of listeners that actually ride as well and are veterinarians. And one of the concerns that they constantly have is how the animals, and specifically the horses, are treated within the Amish culture. And so I would love to expand on this, if you don't mind, a little bit, on is that just a family preference as far as how they care for their animals, or is there just a general regard towards them looking at horses as livestock versus actual family members? Like, how does that work as far as taking care of the horses?
Yeah, I think that's pretty individualistic. We were taught, you take care of the horses, you treat them well, you make sure they have, food and water, and if it's an exceptionally cold night, the horses have to be inside the barn. My father was very conscious about that. And he didn't, really, when we went places, he would be conscious, of the horse, how they were holding up, especially when it was summertime. But then I remember there being a local scandal, about one of the people that we went to church with. His horse had been tied to a hitching rail in a town all day, and the horse had collapsed from the heat. And so, then someone came by and tried to help, and police got involved, and nothing really much came of it for him. But it's kind of an example, here he is with his horse, he's in town all day, leaving his horse in the hot sun. But like, so yeah, it is individualistic because it was so hot, my dad wouldn't have gone to town on that day, considerate of the horse's, physical needs.
Do you think that really just comes from the innocence of just not knowing better, or do you think it's just...
I think a lot of it is just, it's pretty much ignorance because, a lot of Amish don't have education in anything. Right. They have absolutely no life skills whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And, when you add in like a third grade education, so I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for clarifying that, because that is something that comes up a lot, because we hear a lot of concern as far as the puppy mills as well within the Amish culture, which I didn't know that was so popular among the Amish, and then also just the general welfare of the horses. So thank you.
Yeah. Looking back, I don't think anybody in my community had puppy mills. Like I would have known or seen, or, I was a kid back then, so I would have been in the barns or whatever, and I would have saw any puppy mill. But maybe not. But I don't really. I personally have never even seen any puppy mills. But I'm aware that they do exist. Usually, I think in like northern Indiana and the Shipshewana area, where there's like tourism and whatnot, and that's horrible. They need to stop puppy mills altogether.
Agreed.
Go sell more cookies.
More baked goods. Contribute to the obesity of America.
Well, also another thing is, as we're all growing conscious of climate change and, being environmentally friendly, I understand that there's a couple farms Amish farms in Kentucky who are experimenting with organic farming. But, for years, my father included, farmed with fertilizers and pesticides, and that goes on all day, every day. And so, for the Amish to be environmentally conscious is a new thing.
Yeah, because I remember when my family, which were hippie dippies, moved from Northern California to Illinois, the first gardening year was when we learned about seven dust. All the ministers' wives came over and they like brought us gallons of pesticide, and they're like, "You're gonna need this here." And my parents were like, "Oh my God," they were horrified. But I mean, if you're gonna feed your family, that's one way they do it.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever remarry?
He did not. Yeah. He had the opportunity to. I remember Amish women really. What do they call it? Setting their cap for him. Yeah. There was a lady that would write him letters. He was from Ohio, and like he was getting all these letters from her. And then one day he's just like, it's a bit much,
Perfect. So how many siblings do you have? Did they stay in the local area when they moved out, or did they go off into separate churches out of the area from you guys?
Okay, so I had my oldest brother was Robert. Robert sort of crazy paved the way for us all. He was the first to leave the Amish. He was the first to get in a bunch of bar fights and hang out with the wrong crowd. And we all followed in his footsteps. So we all of us ended up leaving the Amish. Dad tried so hard to get us to stay, and we all left. Nothing he did worked.
Wow.
Yeah. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and we all left. I have one brother that's I think he's Mennonite still. It's hard for me to keep track of everyone's religion, but so we all left the Amish. One brother stayed Mennonite. I have no idea what my other siblings, what churches they specifically go to, because we're not currently on speaking terms. We haven't been on speaking terms for 10 years since my dad died.
Okay.
Wow.
We weren't on great terms before that, but then once our only parent,
so
it was a bit we're scattering to the four winds.
So did you come out as gay during your Rumspringa?
I did. I went Rumspringa and I never stopped.
Really?
I'm still Rumspringa.
You're still
Rumspringa.
I want a T-shirt that says that.
Rumspringa, yes.
So how old, will you explain Rumspringa for us then?
Okay, yeah, it's a bit controversial because not every community has that. Some really don't have any environment like that. But Rumspringa, for those that don't know, it's the period when you're like a late teenager and you haven't joined the church yet, and so you're hanging out with your peers, your friends, and you're just doing things like singings. There's some singings. Sometimes the Amish youth will play cards, depending on what your community from, because cards are also very controversial. In our community, there was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of drinking, and country western music. That was pretty much as wild and crazy as it got. The Amish in northern Indiana, like in LaGrange or Shipshawana, they're the party animals, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we weren't quite that bad.
That's what I've heard.
We were working on it, yeah.
What are the statistics of people that go back after leaving, or like you stay out permanently? Do you know the statistics?
I've read that it's 95% of the Amish stay within the church, and but I've always been really dubious about that number, because I would say it's more like maybe the Amish retain 75%, and maybe that other 15% leave, because the 5-10% seems kind of low, and I've known a lot of Amish people to leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're in that process, does your family shun you then, or is it only once you decide not to come back to the church that you are then officially shunned?
I think it doesn't really, it has to do with you not joining the church. For me, I came out as gay to my father, and to my family, but I knew that I was not going to become baptized and join the church. So, and I had, non-Amish friends. So I had some resources that other Amish kids in my shoes wouldn't have.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a way.
How did you even know? Sorry, how did you even know what being gay was as a young Amish boy? Because for myself, as a young Mennonite boy, I really I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was feeling, and I didn't know how to understand.
Yeah, and they don't really enlighten you on these things, I guess.
Exactly, they don't. It's not preached about.
That is one of the biggest problems within the Amish church, and probably the Mennonite church too, and that is lack of sex education. Mm-hmm. All parents, or non-Amish parents, give their kids the birds and bees talk at an early age. They know puberty's coming, and they prepare their kids for these. And this just does not happen in the Amish community. Sex is a very taboo subject. It's ignored as much as possible. It's not spoken of, and so so I had non-Amish family and friends, and so I was sort of exposed a little bit more to the outside world. I had a library card. I did a lot of reading, and I came across some gay writers. And so I figured out that I was gay, but it didn't really help, because I didn't really know what sex was. I didn't really know, I didn't have any examples or role models of gay people. I didn't know what the reality of that was. I just had, people around me saying, this is very bad. If you're this, you're going to hell. If you're, this is,
right.
Yeah, this is not acceptable. So, but I was a very defiant youngster, and I knew there was a larger world out there. and I knew I was leaving the Amish. So I didn't care. I came out and I was in the process of leaving. Both Jasper and I are busy putting our hair up into man buns. My hair is finally long enough. I'm the first Amish to have my hair in a man bun. How do you like that?
It's a very trending style.
It is.
What was the reaction of your family and friends when you came out? Like, did you come out to everybody or just your family?
I came out, I told my dad. He obviously wasn't happy. I told a couple of, like, I think I wrote my cousin a letter, and then this letter, or, she, took it and told everybody else. So it's not like I had to go around and tell, like, 15 people individually. Right. I just told people, and yeah, and my family's reaction was not, they weren't cheering me on. It was not a supportive environment. And so it was like I was already not very close to my siblings. So after that, I really wasn't close to my siblings. So then after my dad passed away in 2010, we really are not on speaking terms. We're not like actively shunning each other. But yeah, we're not really on speaking terms, no.
So when you left and you made this proclamation and decided to embrace that, where did you go? You said that you had supportive family. Like, what was your next step?
I went to the gay bars. I went clubbing. I remember I'm still Rumspringa at this point. So yeah, I ended up staying at Chelsea Del Rey's house in Kalamazoo. She's one of Kalamazoo's premier drag queens.
Okay.
And so because of that, I was, on a third shift schedule. My life revolved around the gay bars and nightclubs. And back then, this was like the year 2000, 2001. Ooh, honey, it was totally happening. It was still underground. It was exciting. Yeah, so it was kind of like I went from one extreme to the other. I went from the Amish to, hanging out with drag queens and male strippers and
wow.
The fun people in society.
Yeah. But here's a really great question is, did you find that you were accepted more in that group than you were in your conservative Amish church and family?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The drag queens were like, we got you, honey. We got you. We've dealt with these people before. and so, that gave me the space and a little, the time that I needed to, come to terms with my own identity and to have role models around me, like literally, because there's no gay couples in the Amish community or the Mennonite community. Right. And so, you're really lacking in that department.
You feel like you learned a lot about love as far as like true, genuine connection and the ability to be empathetic within that transition stage, because that's something that we see a lot with people that transition out, myself included, and I'm sure Mark too, where we have a very skewed sense of what love is. We come from a very conditional, judgmental base, and it's all performance driven. So do you find like that you found the true definition of love within that and you were able to really grow because of that?
Yeah, I would say so, because, for the first time I'm seeing, like physical demonstrations of love, or I'm, seeing firsthand, like, two men in a long-term committed relationship and how that works out on a, like a day-to-day basis. Like my parents, I've heard this a lot from Amish people, but when you grow up Amish, you're not really in a super affectionate environment. Like,
same for Mennonites.
Yeah, you don't see your parents holding hands. You don't see your parents hugging each other. There's a very little physical, affection for children beyond like maybe babies. Like women hugging babies. But beyond that, you really don't. You don't have any of that. You don't see any of that, and so for a large part, you're unaware of that. So yeah, when I became an adult and got into a relationship, that was an issue, was my lack of affection towards him. Like, I remember one time he was like, "Don't you find me attractive?" And I was like, "Of course I do. That, I'm with you." And he's like, "Well, you don't really show it." And I was like, "Whoa," because it's like I'm behaving like my father, right?
Yeah.
Emotionally distant and cold, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, something I think, gay or straight, when you leave the church, that's something that you kind of come across as how you are personally in a relationship.
Right.
And it's usually emotionally stunted and distant.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I've had the same comment in multiple relationships that I've been in. So
Okay.
I very much relate. Yeah.
Okay.
I also believe that when you come from our world where if you show that you love or care about something, it's oftentimes taken away because it's not allowed. You get to this point where you are unable or unwilling to show that you have affection for something because you don't want it taken away. I believe that's there as well, contributing to that emotional distance.
So do you look back on your Amish years with nostalgia?
Oh, absolutely not. Once I left, I was, I was leaving for a reason. I didn't want to live in that environment. I didn't want to. Yeah, when I left, it was very much with the intent of never coming back, and I've never looked back on my Amish years and thought, wow, I could have that again if I wanted to, or I could make a life like that for myself, because to me, the Amish community is very toxic on so many levels, and the one of the only good things that I can honestly say is, I grew up and I spent my days outside. When I was a child, I was playing. I was outside in the country, and I didn't have a television. I didn't have the internet, and so it was a really healthy childhood. So that was something good about the Amish is, growing up. And by the way, I was vaccinated as a child. I attended
Really?
I attended public schools, and it was required to be vaccinated. And my school was like half Amish and half not Amish. So I wasn't the only one that had to get vaccinated. All the Amish kids had to get vaccinated, and we got vaccinated. I got chicken pox. I got vaccinated. No big deal. So I really, this whole anti-vaccination thing that we see today is it's sort of ridiculous, I guess. Just vaccinate your children.
Did you go to public school your entire educational life?
I did not go to. There was an Amish school in the area, but I think they were full or something when I started kindergarten. So I just ended up going to public schools. I had a cousin in public school, and it was fine.
What was that like being Amish? Were you the only Amish child there?
Oh, at the school? No.
Yeah.
There was actually quite a lot of Amish that went to the public school, and the non-Amish students, had Amish neighbors or whatever, so it wasn't like a big deal. Yeah.
Do you feel like you got a better education because you went to public school versus a private school?
Yeah. I do. I had cousins and other people I knew that some of them went to like a Christian, sort of like a Mennonite school. And I thought for years that, they're basically getting what I'm getting, which is like, like an education, like, okay, so, like reading and writing and math and science and, like basic things. And then maybe you have like a Bible study or something on top of that. But that is not at all the education. They did not get any of that. They got like some basic math and a bunch of Bible stories.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what they got.
And that's what I got. That's like, I'm like so jealous. You got science. That was so difficult when I went to college and I had never had a science class.
Yeah, that's so unfair. I mean, Yeah, I took a year of high school. My father really didn't like me, continuing higher education. Like, the Amish at that point, I had left the church, but they were looking at me like, who does this faggot think he is? And it was, and so my father was like, you have to stay home. You got to work for me. I had ran off to Florida. I went to Sarasota for a little bit. This is in like 2001, and I was dating down there. And one day my father shows up at the door. Right, I'm completely shocked. He's supposed to be in Michigan, and here he is in Florida at my door. And he's like, "Yeah, you need to come home. I'm getting older, and I need someone to take care of me, and nobody else is gonna do it." And so I did. I did it. I went home. I took care of him. I was his caretaker until his passing in 2010. So I was, it was like I was living, at the farm then. I was helping take care of him. But then I had my own life where I would, drive to a gay club or go hang out with gay friends. In 2007, I got in a relationship with someone, so I had that going on.
Was he still a member of the church whenever you were doing that?
He was. Beyond, like living, like the Amish knew I was living at the farm. They knew I was taking care of Dad. And that was okay by them because that meant they didn't have to do it, right?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, my brothers and sisters were okay with it because that meant they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to give up their lives to take care of Dad. And I was willing to do that for him. And, in return, I got to spend time. Me and my dad got along. Like if the subject of my sexuality came up, it wasn't good. But, we could sort of both overlook this to have a normal sort of relationship. And he wasn't shunning me. I mean, my dad was a pretty cool dude in a lot of aspects. So, and then after his passing in 2010, that's when I decided to move. And I ended up coming out here to Hawaii in 2017.
Okay. So what happened to the family farm? Did it stay in the family, or when you left, did you guys sell it, or how did that work?
Yeah, they ended up selling it, my siblings. None of them were farmers, so yeah, and they weren't Amish anymore either,
Right.
It was kind of like the end of an era when my dad died.
Yeah.
It was the last Amish link, right?
So where did you go next before you went to Hawaii? You said you moved there in 2017, so that gives 7 years. What did you do in that meantime?
Yeah, I lived with a friend, and I worked a regular job and just, sort of worked to survive. And I didn't really see a lot of my family, but I was in the area, and occasionally I would from time to time. But yeah, that was after and then my book had come out the year after my dad passed away.
Okay.
And so I was formally out to everyone. And I remember I took a couple copies of my book, which is The Literary Party Growing Up Gay and Amish in America. Yeah. It's a collection of poetry. Yes. And I gave a couple copies to the Amish in my community to get them into circulation. And so I'm wondering what, if I need to do any damage control in Michigan now because...
Oh my God. Or they've got it in their church library.
So in 2014, okay, so to back up for a minute, after my book had come out, a gay Amish guy named Tad Slaybaugh read my book, and him and his partner Jeffrey were inspired to start LGBTAmish.com, which is the first Amish support group.
What?
Yes. And so in 2014, I marched for LGBT Amish in the Michigan State Pride Parade in Lansing.
Wait.
It was the first time that Amish had been represented at a Pride event.
I'm like blown away. Like, where's the... are the Mennonites involved in this too?
No, it's just Amish.
It's just Amish. Oh my goodness. Mennonites, y'all need to step up.
Mark, you can go back and join the Amish church just so you can leave. And join him tomorrow.
I'm gonna go back and join the Amish church just so I can leave. I would do Rumspringa.
I would never leave it though. Also, like,
why would you stop Rumspringa? Like,
I don't know. That's a very valid question.
This is just a side story. So the other day, I met some Amish kids who were on Rumspringa, and they were driving these really nice sports cars. And the one guy had an $80,000 BMW. And I asked him what he's going to do with it when he joins the church, and he's like, "Well, I'm just going to sell it." And I'm like, "You're going to take quite the loss on that." And he goes, "Well, who cares? It's only money." Okay, it must be nice to be Rumspringa.
Did you give him your number? Like,
when you decide to leave, you want to sell that car.
Yeah.
I'll give you, and then just ditch it. Yeah.
There needs to actually be like a car lot, a Rumspringa car lot. Like that actually, starting to write about your journey and coming out with your book of poems. And I know that you're a very avid writer. What's that been like as far as talking about your past and really talking about everything? What's come up for you as you've done that? Because I know a lot of people that have left are scared to write their story because of the judgment that's placed. So how was your experience?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. Even from an early age, I was a kid that always had my nose in a book. I remember, one of the bishops or something commenting when I was younger that I was going to be a preacher or something, because I was very studious. I was kind of shy. I was very quiet. I was actually kind of effeminate, but, he didn't pick up on that, obviously, or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I was that kid that, well, he's going to be a preacher. You can tell, he's always reading books. But what they didn't realize is what kind of books I was actually reading. I was not reading Bible stories. I was not reading, National Geographic magazine. I was reading like books that I had, got from the library.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like reading Robinson Crusoe and Charles Dickens. And, I really developed a taste for world literature. I remember reading, as a late teenager, like Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams and other gay writers. And it was like, it kind of made me aware of, the outside world, and also made me aware of where the Amish are in this particular place and time, where I sort of fit in the grand scheme of things, But yeah, that was probably the most important part of my development growing up, was reading and getting the chance to read. I wasn't distracted by a television or, siblings or whatever. I had the time to read, and so I did. And so I knew I wanted to be a writer. And, but yeah, again, so this is kind of one-sided because, then my book comes out, and then I have a couple books out, and, I get a great reception from this side of the fence, but there's not a whole lot on the other side of the fence, which is the Amish side of the fence, and the fence that my family's on. None of my siblings are rushing out to purchase my latest poetry collection. They don't want to read sonnets about my desire for men or whatever, but, so, but yeah, in terms of, just in terms of writing, it was something that was predestined.
I love that. And I love the fact that you had the capability to be able to read books that were not censored through the church, like so many that I know, where it's all Christian-like publications and it's all, seemingly propaganda. And the fact that you were able to read real acts of literature coupled with a great education, I think that was really a breeding ground for that too.
Yeah, definitely. And, my dad was cool with me, not supervising my reading, letting me read whatever. But for a lot of Amish families, that would not be the case. Their reading would be supervised. They would not have a library card, or, their parents are going to be checking all the time to see that they're guiding what they read. You need to read this, or you need to read that,
like Henry and the Great Society.
Yeah. You can read the Martyr Mirrors again, you know?
Yeah. it really goes to show that as structured as the churches are, there's so much freedom within a family if you have a supportive set of parents. I have a really great friend that grew up very conservative Eastern and had a wonderful experience. He's left the church, but he still is on very good terms with his family who's still in the church. And he had talked about coming on here, and he's like, well, I feel bad because I had a great experience. And I said, no, I said, that's wonderful because it gives another it shines a light on how much the parents really can contribute to a sense of freedom and a sense of individuality within their children and love. So that way they can go off and explore the world and be well-rounded like yourself. So kudos to your father for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the most important things that you can do. You know, like if you're Amish, if there's anybody Amish that's, you know, considering leaving, you need to read some books. You know, you need to, you just need to read some books. I'm not sure specifically what books, but you need some life skills, and reading is the way to do that.
Yeah. So you moved to Hawaii in 2017. What prompted that?
Okay, yeah, so I was pretty much at 2017, I was working, like I worked in retail. It was a third shift full-time job, and, you know, it was kind of like work 40 hours a week, pay my rent, work 40 hours a week, pay my car insurance, work 40 hours a week, pay my rent, work 40 hours a week. I can't afford to pay my car repairs because I have to pay car insurance. And I was like on this hamster wheel where I was barely surviving, you know, and it was like I need to change my life drastically. And so, yeah, I was online and I was talking to people, and a friend was like, well, you know, you could come out here to Hawaii and go halfway around the world and start over completely. And I was like, oh, I like that idea, you know. I had already lived in Florida, and, you know, Florida's lovely, but it's a lot of, it's more of a retirement, you know, retirement community, a lot of it. And so, I was already aware of that. So I was like, I really don't feel like going back to Florida. So Hawaii it was. Yeah, I remember being on the plane going from LA airport to Hawaii, and like I was thinking about my ancestors, you know, who had crossed an ocean, you know, from like Switzerland to come to America. Yeah. And I'm wondering, you know, am I making the right decision? And like 10 minutes later, as I'm looking out the window, an Air Swiss plane goes past me the other direction, you know, right? So I'm staring at this flag of Switzerland like, am I dreaming? So I took that as a sign that I was on the right track. And I came out here, and there's a lot of aloha here. There's a lot of people here that have looked after me in one way or another. And yeah, I love it out here. The weather's beautiful. For our listeners that don't know, Puna, Hawaii is on the Big Island. It is in the neighborhood of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. And last year I lived through, you know, a lava, like a volcano eruption. So the place that I was actually living at is okay, but lava came into the neighborhood and pretty much destroyed everything else. And yeah, it can be really intense on this island when lava is flowing. It's definitely a different mindset. You're watching the earth be reborn and formed right in front of your eyes. And, you know, it's also destroying a lot of the earth to create new earth. You know, it's definitely a different mindset. It's very spiritual out here. Puna attracts spiritual seekers from all over the world. On any given day, you will see backpackers and you know, international people here. And it definitely has a very spiritual energy here. There's no Amish here. There's no horse and buggies on the road. This is my first time where I don't have to worry about driving down the road and, you know, dealing with horse and buggies because they're not here.
I'm just curious. So when you were growing up gay and Amish, did you ever think about what it would be like to stay in the Amish church and be gay?
Yeah, I sort of wondered what that would look like, and I didn't like what it looked like. Like, it seemed really lonely. Yeah. Okay. So after my mother passed, like Dad and I did several Amish trips with Kenny Stutzman. Some people may be familiar with Kenny Stutzman. Did the Green Country tours.
Yes, yes,
Or,
I'm very familiar with that.
oh, okay, okay. So yeah, we did those tours. We went to Florida, we went to Washington D.C., and we went to out west. And it was on one of those trips. There was like a single Amish guy, and he was gay, but I was probably like 12 or 13. So I was kind of like I kind of picked up on that energy of his, but I didn't really understand it. But looking back, yeah, I totally understand that he was gay and he was sort of, he was really projecting his own sexuality kind of on me. Like he kind of connected with me and that was like, and he was Amish and he, you know, as far as I know, he still is Amish. But that was the first time that I had really, yeah, sort of realized that there might be gay people, especially looking back later, knowing that there's gay people in the Amish church that are not leaving. They're just there. Yeah.
So if you could go back and tell yourself something to your younger self, what would you say?
Um, I guess I would tell myself to just, you know, hang in there. Don't worry about other people's opinions. Don't worry about other people's judgments. Because no matter what you do in this life, especially if you're raised Amish, you are going to have people judge you one way or another. So it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to, I would just say, yeah, you have to stay the course. You have to be true to yourself. You know that being Amish is not what you want, so you have to leave. And so, yeah, I feel that the only really helpful thing I could say to my past self, I guess, is just have faith, you know, that things will work out and it will get better for you. Um, and yeah, and I would say the same thing for any Amish listener out there, especially a gay Amish listener. You know, if you leave, you will get, you know, and you can tap in and connect to resources. You can make a better life for yourself if that's what you want. If you want to stay in the Amish, you're going to be living sort of a duplicitous lifestyle, and you're not ever going to really be happy because you're always going to be wondering what your life would be like if you had left the Amish. You know, what opportunities you would have in life if you did leave. So, being in your safety, you know, being in the Amish is like being in like your, you know, the safe bubble. You know, you have your community there, your whole world's wrapped up there, and you feel safe. But so yeah, to walk away from that is harder for some people than it is for others. I'm aware of that, but for me, the best decision was to leave.
What were the most helpful resources for you as you transitioned out of the church? Aside from going and spending time with all of the drag queens, which are my favorite as well. Because let's be honest, they have the best makeup ever.
Yes, yes. So resources. I remember having being on the phone with, I think it was the Trevor Project. If there's any gay Amish out there, you need, and you're, you know, really struggling with needing to talk to someone, yeah, the Trevor Project is amazing. A free call, and it's for any LGBT youth or, you know, in general, people that want to talk about, you know, their repression or isolation or being shunned or whatever. That was really good to do. It was just to have someone to talk to and empathize with and know what I'm going through in a broader sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be an important. And you know, if you want to connect with and talk to other gay Amish, there's lgbtamish.com. The Amish Heritage Foundation will also hook you up if you need to.
Can you explain more about the Amish Heritage Foundation?
Okay, so the Amish Heritage Foundation is from Tora Bontrager, who does a podcast and some shows. That she formed the foundation, which is to help people. It is to help people in the Amish community that have been that need maybe counseling or resources because they're dealing with abuse issues, like they were sexually abused or physically abused or whatever the case may be. So yeah, any of that, the Amish Heritage Foundation, you can Google that. They have a website. And Tora will help you leave the Amish if you need to, or hook you up with someone else if that's the case. When I was growing up, I didn't have any of that, but now here we are, and trying to give the Amish a valid choice, instead of being pressured on one side or the other, Like if they just want to leave, it's very final, to give Amish resources and help, and in terms of resources for abuse, resources if they want to leave the Amish and continue their education, right, and help them in whatever way possible. But yeah, because a lot of times the Amish leave and they're promised help from one of their Mennonite neighbors or maybe a distant cousin or something, and then they're sort of they go from being Amish to being in this right-wing, uber conservative type Christian environment. Yeah. And that is so offensive to me, because if you look at the original Anabaptists, that were the first Amish, right, in Europe, they were actually very liberal. They were not at all conservative whatsoever. I would like to just put that out there. And I would also like to put out there that I'm very thankful that some of the Mennonites are at the border helping the immigrants that are coming here. They're actually on the ground. They're offering safe houses. This to me is Anabaptist.
You're right.
Not this conservative, right wing that I'm seeing from some people. It's unbelievable.
We get a lot of messages from people, and I've had some beautiful messages that we've received lately from just some true Anabaptists that have the most amazing hearts, full of love, really trying to really create a change. They're not this DC that are very much, we were born Amish, we were born Mennonite. Anybody that's joined in is not a true card-holding, saw that quote recently, card-holding Mennonite or card-holding Amish, and this almost elitist mentality, which is not Christ-like if you're spiritual at all, and it's definitely not Anabaptist-like at all as well.
Right.
So they keep with true Anabaptism.
That's true.
Yeah, it's Anabaptists are pretty enlightened, especially starting out, and then it's sort of like culture played a lot with their devolution, right? But yeah, and not attending school, really separating their youth from society, forcing them to attend their own schools where they're not actually getting an education. That was also a huge misstep for the Amish community. But there's hope, the Amish need to make some hard decisions in the future, especially going forward. We're living in more and more modern times, and there's a bigger growing gap between the Amish and society. So maybe the technology can sort of transform them or something.
What would you do to create a change within the Amish church?
Well, that is one thing that the Amish Heritage Foundation is seeking to do, is to overturn the Yoder versus Wisconsin, the Supreme ruling.
Yes.
So that's where my money would be.
We're seeing that actually play out within the David Smooker investigation. That's come into light here in Pennsylvania. David Smooker is an Amish man who's been accused of sexually assaulting several minors, and people have been citing that case as precedent for handling, the Plain people. And it's like, no, we need to overturn that.
And Tora is currently on tour right now to have that, to bring awareness to overturn that, correct?
Yeah.
She's going state by state. Is that true?
Yes, as far as I know, yes. For people that don't know, this was held Yoder versus the Wisconsin, I guess, was a Supreme Court case, and it was hailed as a sort of in the name of like religious liberty. And basically there was, it wasn't like Yoder, like Amish people versus, the state. It was, there wasn't really any Amish directly involved in that court case. It was people representing the Amish or people that were friendly to the Amish, and they had their own interests.
It set the precedent for how the plain people now.
And that would be one of the biggest things of helping the Amish would be overturning that. The Amish need education. They need to go to school.
Yeah.
They need to actually receive a helpful education. And that's not really happening.
What's something that you want our listeners to know about your life in general or about the Amish in general?
In terms of the Amish, I would want them to know that the Amish are very, they could have kind hearts, but they're very ignorant because they don't have an education. They don't have a lot of, they haven't seen a lot of the world. And so it's not so much that they're like incredibly like hateful people. It's just more like they're ignorant, they're kind of stuck in the dark ages. And so, I would say a lot of the problems, including like homophobia that comes from the Amish, is just stemmed from ignorance and not having any example to set before them,
Well, thank you.
How else would you recommend somebody that is within a community of Amish, to be able to reach out and be a support system for them, so maybe they have a safe place to go if they do want to transition out and they don't know about the Amish Heritage Foundation?
So if you're you're saying if you're not Amish, right, and you want to help an Amish person out?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you could contact the Amish Heritage Foundation, and say, hey, I would like to offer myself as a safe house for people. That would be awesome. That would be huge, actually.
It's good to know. That's very helpful for our listenership that do want to contribute and do want to help. We can direct them your way.
Yeah, and it's really important to have dialogue by like ex-Amish, for example, like the podcast that we're doing now. There could be there's going to be an Amish person out there in the cornfield with their battery CD player listening.
Yes.
And that is our conversation is like oxygen to them because they need it. They need to hear this.
Yes.
And they're not hearing it. So thank you for doing the Lord's work.
Thank you for coming on our podcast and sharing your story. I mean, you were in the New York Times. We're lucky that you grace our humble little podcast.
Oh, anytime, honey.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better and having you share.
Absolutely. Mahalo. Mahalo, Laura. The joke here is James used to be Amish. Then he went English. Now he's Hawaiian.
I love it. We'll come visit you.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Have a good night, guys.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
No.